Establishing atmosphere in a storytelling medium is essential to keeping an audience engaged, as well as keeping the work memorable to that audience. A story's atmosphere can be lonely or lively, bleak or colorful, frightening or beautiful. In the video game space, atmosphere can be established more easily because of the medium's direct involvement of the audience. For this reason, there are many great examples of video games that effectively establish atmosphere for their players, but the focus of this video will be the 2005 PlayStation 2 title Shadow of the Colossus, which uses story, visuals, and sound to portray tones of loneliness, triumph, and sadness. Shadow of the Colossus' gameplay consists of two major portions: battles with the Colossi, and traveling to each fight. There are a few 5 to 10 minute scenes towards the beginning and ending as well. While the atmosphere changes drastically between these three segments, they all use visual and audio elements to establish the tone for each situation. The cinematics in Shadow of the Colossus are slow and somber. The music reflects this, with soft choirs and a very slow tempo. There are very few characters in the beginning scene. The player character Wander, his horse Agro, the dead woman he lays down at the altar, and the voices of Dorman. All dialogue between Dorman and Wander are done in a fictional language with subtitles, further cementing how far off this land and culture are. While there is a conversation with Dorman at the beginning, he or they is or are very intentionally designed to be unrelatable, as they or he are a godlike entity, a disembodied collection of voices in a temple. All of Dorman's dialogue beyond this point is strictly one way in the form of riddles telling where the next Colossus is located. However, in giving his task, he does warn that there will be a great consequence. With no relatable characters in the story other than our protagonist, the game establishes a feeling of loneliness, which is perpetuated by the segments of travel to each Colossus. With a horse as the only companion, traversal of the Forbidden Land feels very isolated. The visuals portray this through several landscape features that work toward the same goal. The wide open fields of the Forbidden Land are fairly sparse when it comes to wildlife. There are a few lizards, some birds, and a few tortoises in one area. But outside of these sparse encounters, the land is devoid of fauna. Sprinkled throughout these fields are man-made stone structures overgrown with moss and falling to pieces, giving the impression that there was once a civilization in this Forbidden Land, but years and years have passed. As the player continues traversing through valleys, caves, and forests, while some of the sound might change, such as Wander's yells echoing off rock faces, The music remains absent throughout all travel. Getting from one place to another, appreciating the scenery, and anticipating the next Colossus battle are all that runs through the player's minds. In addition to maybe collecting some fruit and some lizard tails as small upgrades. Traveling with just the horse and with so little fauna on the land establishes a tone of loneliness. While Agro does exhibit some personality traits, such as walking out of the way when you aim your bow, or moving over to a watering hole to drink water when you're off wandering somewhere else. Agro is really your only companion, and a horse doesn't really offer much for conversation. The ancient, crumbling feeling portrayed by the ruins found earlier carries over to the way the Colossi look and move. While some of them are active as the player arrives, some are found as massive piles of fur and stone that slowly rise to the sound of crumbling and grinding stone. Some of the humanoid colossi have broken stone features built into their bodies, making them seem like an extension of the landscape, or like a moving mountain. The blood that sprays from their wounds further captures their ancient composure. The black substance looks and sounds more like sand and dissolves in the air after each strike. The eyes of each creature are arguably their most iconic feature. Each has blue eyes that transition to orange when provoked or on the offensive. The blue color gives each creature a mystical presence, while the orange is a clear sign to the player that the beast has been angered. The sound design further captures the power of each foe, with thundering footsteps or crashing attacks. The fourth Colossus requires the player to hide from it in bunkers carved into dirt hills. In the bunker, every one of the beast's footsteps reverberates, and the dirt falls from the ceiling to capture the power of the creature the player is hiding from. While ambient sound is important for a battle's atmosphere, the music often takes center stage for the sound in these battles. For example, the fifth Colossus, as shown here, sits atop a perch and watches wander. The track used here is called Silence, and its slow, almost eerie violin chords gives the feeling of a beast stalking prey, awaiting for the perfect time to strike, a metaphor that can go for either the player or the Colossus. This particular creature does not attack until provoked, but slow-moving, aggressive colossi get their own style of music, featuring low-pitched brass instruments and slow tempos to emphasize their size and power. Despite how massive a colossus can be, there are some that move at high speeds. The 10th Colossus is a burrowing snake-like creature that chases the player around a cavern. The only way to effectively outrun it is to ride atop aggro and wait for its large orange eyes to open and blind it with an arrow. In order for this to work properly, it must be on a collision course with a cavern wall, so the player must manage their speed while avoiding obstacles and watch the trailing Colossus for the opportune moment to strike, leading to one of the most tense and stressful battles in the game. The music sets the tone perfectly here as well, with fast tempo strings that sound like something out of a horror film. The music that plays when a Colossus is under attack can best be described as triumphant. After all the hard work figuring out a proper method to defeat each Colossus, going in for the kill is met with a fanfare. Some of these tracks, including the one playing now, are among my favorite orchestral pieces ever. Here's another example with the bird Colossus from earlier. These sweeping orchestral scores are fitting for the feat that is essentially slaying a mountain. But the call for celebration does not last long. As each Colossus graciously falls to the earth, its death is mourned with a somber choir similar to the one that accompanies the game's opening scene. Strange mystical tendrils emerge from their corpses and chase and violently attack the player character, which pushes further the idea that slaying Colossi is not necessarily a joyous occasion. It is important to remember that some Colossi, such as the 7th and 13th, are completely passive, while others attack only when provoked. Even for the creatures that are aggressive or perhaps frustrating to defeat, a sense of sadness is created for their passing, which plays into the game's larger story themes of loss, death, and challenging traditional video game stories. But that's a topic for another analysis. So, from a somber, calm introduction and peaceful exploration, to the tension build-up of each battle, to their pulse-pounding climax, and then the return to the calmness and star that began it all, Shadow of the Colossus succeeds in establishing atmosphere through its visual and audio design and artistic and musical direction.